I don't mean to sound self-deprecating, but honestly, sometimes I wonder why people say yes to come on Move Daily Talks podcast. Like, who am I? Who are we? Sometimes I feel like I'm just, like the smallest fish in the biggest pond. However, when people do say yes, I am completely thrilled. When they say yes twice, I am overjoyed. And our guest today is a second timer here on Move Daily Talks, and it's Dr. Stuart Phillips. If you didn't get a chance to listen to the first one, Stuart Phillips is a distinguished university professor in kinesiology at McMaster University and a Tier 1 Canada Research Chair in Skeletal Muscle Health in Aging. This is why he's such a great guest to have on for our audience here. He directs McMaster's Physical Activity Center of Excellence, otherwise known as PACE, and the Exercise Metabolism Research Group. And of course, he has authored hundreds of papers on how nutrition and resistance exercise regulate muscle protein synthesis and preserve muscle with age. So, needless to say, he is an expert in this field, specifically in resistance training and protein. And I'm just so happy to have him back. Okay, so you have had such a busy year since we last talked. I can't believe it. You're famous now, Stuart.
I'm
You're all over
famous.
the
Yeah.
place.
Yeah. Thanks. Well, my kids don't think so. My kids criticize everything I do on social media these days. So I'm infamous in their mind.
Oh, totally. We get mocked by our children. It's so bad. I know.
Absolutely.
I've told my kids once that I'm like, I said, well, now that I'm a public figure, and oh, I should never have said that. That full mockery on that language.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I mean, I've watched you, I'm following you, of course, and I have seen you more and more, which is amazing. I have loved your content. So that's excellent. Good for you, just coming
Thank
into
you.
that social media space and speaking more and teaching us more. What has this last year been like for you in terms of what you're bringing to the masses for education?
Yeah, I think going way back when, I mean, it was just Facebook and then Twitter had first started. It was kind of on a dare that you start this stuff, particularly as an academic, because, why would you bother doing that sort of thing? And it started just as kind of a joke, kind of a laugh, but now it's become intentional with the knowledge that, I teach students in their first year through fourth year of university, and they go to social media for their news and where they get information from. So, I said to lots of colleagues, like, I've just made a conscious decision to try and be present in the medium that people that we're relating to and trying to educate go for their information, because they don't pick up newspapers anymore. I don't think very many of them even read the news, and they get their information from social media. So really important, I think, for a few people at least to be out there. I would love for more academics to be out there, but it's tough, right? It's sort of been a love-hate relationship. There are moments where I love it, and other moments where somebody will make a comment, and I'm thinking to myself, should I respond to this, or should I just sit down and shut up? But yeah, so good and bad, like
Yeah,
probably most people.
that side is painful. I don't like that side at all.
Yeah,
Because you do get, sometimes if you go viral, you reach the wrong audience and it's hard. You just like you're
yeah,
human too, right? So,
sure.
and you've worked hard and you've curated your education and your knowledge and your expertise, and then someone like dares to try and speak against you. It's like, what?
Well, I know I have no issues with people speaking against or disagreeing with my point of view. The hardest part is to, take quote unquote criticism from somebody who, you know full well they're either uninformed or they're misinformed, and you're just like, well, after a while, and it has its moments where I will come back and everything, and then after a while, I'm like. Why am I arguing with this person? What's the point? I mean, if they're a true peer, and I mean that in the sense of like on a knowledge level, I have no problems taking my licks and saying, yeah, agree to disagree, or you've got your opinion, you can cite your papers, I can cite mine. But if it's just, name calling backwards and forwards, I'm like, okay, get out of this.
Yeah, like I don't have time. I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
Who have you been seeing in the space come up? Like who are you following? Who are you connecting with? Who are you proud to be called a peer with?
Yeah, so yeah, I'll be flat out honest. One of my former PhD students, Lauren Colenso Semple, is out there, and she's battling and trying to get the good word out. I respect what she does, and she trained here, so it's hard for me to disagree with her point of view and training and everything. And but there are lots of others. I was on a podcast with Andrew Coates the other day. I'm always really impressed with his content. Your stuff, it's awesome.
Oh,
You keep it real, and I think that there are a lot of other people out there who just talk, realistic science and capabilities of people, and don't, lean on things that I think are, I'll call them trendy for lack of a better word. Weighted vests comes to mind. And you can get caught up in this, right? I mean, it's easy to look at influence, and if that's followers, as, so I know what I'm talking about, and quickly realize that that's not the case. So, engage with people who have 1 million+ followers at your peril. And you know me, right? Like I've sort of been a big proponent of the difference between doing their research and doing the research. So, as I say, we do the research, and we've done it for 30 years. And when I say we, it's not just me. There's a cast of 16 graduate students, postdoc fellows, and lots of other people that create the knowledge that I read. But it goes well beyond that. Conferences, talks, chats with peers in the area. Brad Schoenfeld's a great friend and colleague. Lots of other folks in that space who, I look to their accounts and just say, these guys are keeping it real, and it's always knowledge based and fact based. So
always when I use ChatGPT to help me create coaching calls, I'm like, in
yeah.
the voice of Dr. Stuart Phillips and Brad
Ah.
Schoenfeld. I
Well,
do.
that's very generous of you to say. I hopefully it's not the voice maybe as much as just like just the evidence back part. I don't know if I have a
That's right.
distinctive voice or a good voice, but yeah, like it's just real, right? And try not to overpromise and underdeliver on things, and be a little bit humble as well. And that's, there's lots of people who post signs you can tell when somebody's just dogging it and just going hard. And it's because they're very like, well, this is absolutely the way, not just a way. And, you've been in science for long enough, you've seen things come and go. And you realize that science is a process, and that there's very few absolutes. So, yeah, that's how I try and roll. It might not come off that way sometimes. So
It comes off that way. Absolutely. It does. It's good. I find it very relatable. And there's some people that I follow, find that just it's not relatable. It's just, yeah, it's just more fluffy. And I like, just give it to me
yeah,
solid, which is what you
yeah,
do, which is awesome.
for
So we're
sure.
talking about women in midlife. Of course, that's our target audience.
Mm,
That's who's
yeah,
listening to these podcasts right now. And one of the things I think that people are seeing is that there are almost kind of like two different ways to look at our approach to fitness, wellness, and nutrition. There's really the optimal way. So if you really
right.
want to optimize your fitness, your workouts, your strength training, right? Your wellness, then your nutrition, maybe follow these protocols. But
Hmm.
if you're just going, you know what, I've heard that I should probably start lifting weights. I've heard that I should eat more protein. I've heard that I
Yeah,
should walk and practice longevity. So we
yeah,
have almost these two polarizing camps. But so I would like, so sometimes it is confusing for people because the
yeah,
mass sees the optimal, right? And then they
yeah,
think they need
yeah,
to go for the optimal, which has been problematic. And I know
yeah.
that's part of what you tried to teach us about. So let's talk about those two camps though. I'd love to
Sure.
hear what entry level should look like, could look like for women listening, and then what optimal could look like in all of these categories.
Sure. I mean, I don't do much of it, but I move in circles where, I've had the pleasure and obviously humbling to meet with some very good elite level athletes and see what they do. And I think it might surprise some people. Like when you're at the top level of sport, or in anything that you're doing, or even some of the, I'll just call it top sub-elite levels to compete in whatever sport it is, it's actually not healthy. It's
Mhm.
pathologic almost, the amount of time and effort and things that people put in. And like if you want to do that, I think it's fantastic. And if that's your goal, who am I to argue, right? And so I'll never try and talk anybody out of like, if you want to, if competition and elite performance is your goal, but there's and when I say big difference, I mean big with a capital B difference between elite and optimized performance, which is a
Mhm.
fine goal for a small set of people. And again, to sort of emphasize how small, I probably spend an overly large amount of time putting out statistics on how many people don't actually do, I mean, anything. And that's most of the people when it comes at least to resistance training. And we can argue about, whether they meet the 150 minutes of, moderate to vigorous aerobic guidelines. All of that data is by self-report, right? So people tell us what they're doing, right? So you have to always take it with a little grain of salt, a little bit like people reporting on their dietary intake, because you always want to look good. So people portray themselves a little bit better, because if everybody who said that they were meeting it were doing it, we all should be a whole lot healthier than we are, right? So I'm a little bit skeptical. When I say most people are in the do very little or do nothing category, and then people say, oh, well, I'm doing something, and then I'm doing more of something, and then I'm doing more of more. Now you're becoming down to, and it's impossible to put a number on it, but I would guess that it's in the neighborhood of sort of 2 to 5% of individuals who truly care about performance. In other words, it's either an age related, like a category, you're competing in over blank, 40, 50, whatever it is, and you care about performance, and then the rest of us care about health. And if we look at it through that lens, and it's not performance, it's just health.
Mhm.
And I differentiate between, a lot of people talk about longevity, and I'm like, longevity is awesome. No, don't we all want to live forever? But it's health span that most people are into. So, at some point, we're all going to die. So that's off the books. The chances are 1.0. But it's how we die and how we live, right? So, live a healthy life for as long as you can, and then this sort of concept of compressed morbidity, you just drop off the table at the end and hopefully just go to sleep and never wake up. Um, but that takes much less effort to hit those goals. And the thought is it's sort of like you need to wring every last drop out of the cloth, and you need to optimize this and this and this and this, and that will result in longevity. And the truth is, when people say that, there is zero point zero data that they have to make that claim. Like there's no data. But people are saying it because health and longevity, or health span and longevity, are, it's a buzzword, and everybody's looking for it, right? So I get it, but optimization through programming, how many hours a day, nutrition, supplements, etc., is much, and underscore the word much, different than programming for health and what we know from health and health span, which you can get from, like, walking is a great activity. Would I prefer people lifted weights? Sure. Once a week, excellent. Twice a week, better. 3 times, I'm like, if you want to. 4 times, I'm like, not necessary, but totally fine if you like it. You know, and just a little bit of a, I don't know if it's the right phrase, but sort of a live and let live attitude a little bit more, because everything that we know comes from entry level participation in activity. And that's where the steepest drop in risk and the greatest benefit really happens. After that, it's always a dose response. And, when you look at it that way, yeah, some is good, more is better, but more than more. it's a diminishing return. And but I understand the rally behind the optimization cry. I just think it's important for people to recognize it's a very different goal.
Yeah, I think that is such a good point to distinguish that when we go from zero and then we move to something, you see the
Yeah.
biggest drive of improvement. Um,
Yep.
yeah, and so, but yeah, there are women, like I coach a lot of them, and
Mhm.
women are definitely looking to be the best version of themselves. And so with,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Power to them, right? Like awesome. And I'll never talk anybody like if you want to progress and you want to, like probably you were an achiever before they came and worked with you, right? You achieved in sport as a kid or whatever it was you were doing. You achieved in career goals, and that's just your persona. And like even like I'm a competitive person, so I hate going slower than somebody on a bike ride or something, or lifting less than somebody in the gym. But I know if I try and lift more, I'm going to be hurt the next day or I can't move, right? So, and I'm like, I'll live to fight the next day. So, it takes a change in attitude, but that's a fine attitude and go for it. Like, but just realize if you're that person, you're a pretty small percentage of people. I know when you're looking at social media, it might be tempting to think that actually that's the majority of people, like in real life, away from Instagram and all the followers and people who, are drinking the Kool-Aid, that's a small, thin slice of folks, I think.
Yeah, I'll put out some beginner workouts from time to time, and those often go more viral, right? It's because here's your introductory lesson on how to lift
Yeah,
weights or how to get started or how to start
yeah,
moving daily. Yeah,
yeah,
I just really like the passion that you have around that because for those listening, our audience is probably generally already moving daily. They're probably already,
hmm
looking to do a little bit
yeah,
more, but
sure.
I appreciate that the majority of people are just not doing anything at all. So that comes across really clearly as your message. It's like, let's just get you from the couch to start moving daily, and then you're winning, folks.
Yeah, especially when it comes to lifting. Like,
Yeah,
say when I think when most people they get the message from their clinician or somebody else, like you've got to do more activity. Sometimes you hear exercise, but you've got to be more physically active. Everybody thinks walking. I mean, you can go out your front door. Nobody needs to be taught how to walk. It's
free.
just, and as long as you've got the safe neighborhood and everything else, aces, like I got it. And then when you say, and you've got to do some strengthening work, and they go like, what do you mean? And that's where, I think folks like you can come in and sort of because people ask me all the time, they're like, how do I do this? Like, what do I do? Like, I've never lifted a weight. And more women than men would say that, obviously. But now I think it's becoming more, okay, I've seen a few workouts, but do I need to do that? And I'm like, you just need to do something regularly. So let's find something that you can manage and you can handle it and build the habit and don't hate it, hopefully. Because, like, I mean, there's some things I don't like doing, but I do them. But if I really hate it, I'm like, who will do that? So I'm like, okay, let's remove that barrier. So kudos to you and lots of folks out there who are just putting good information out. I think I've looked at some of your work. I think they're awesome. I think that it's basic stuff. It's good guidance. It's safe and everything else like that. But you want to throw, 150 pounds over your head, man, go for it. Awesome. Love it.
Yeah, you're right, though. Some of the loud voices are saying, do not lift light. Every woman in menopause must lift heavy weights. And that's just a
Yeah.
recipe for not showing up again tomorrow, folks.
Well,
If you
and it's
start
not
there.
needed. It's not needed. Let's put an underscore under if health is the goal that you have, then you need to give me a health outcome for which a heavy resistance workout is needed. Needed. Underscore needed. And people immediately jump to bone. And I'm like, that's not true. And I've tried to put stuff out there to emphasize that to people. They say, oh, the lift more trial. I'm like, didn't actually show that heavy was needed. it showed that heavy worked, but
Right.
that's not the same as heavy is needed, right? So even from the same group of researchers, meta-analysis, lighter weights and consistency wins over like it has to be heavy. So
Let's talk about bones since you just brought that
yeah.
up, because that is a huge concern for so many of us,
Sure.
right? I just
Yeah.
had my second DEXA scan a few weeks ago and was
Okay.
pleasantly surprised, not surprised. I
Good.
was very pleased. I knew that
Good.
I was going on the right trajectory and good T
Yeah.
score, good Z score. But
Excellent.
again, let's talk about minimal effective dose for women. How
Yeah.
do we ensure that we're not declining in that bone mineral density too quickly?
Yeah, I mean it's tough, right? I mean, like a lot of chronic diseases, osteopenia, osteoporosis has family history is a strong risk factor. So if your mom, grandma, immediate family members have, and dad and uncles as well, because men get it as well as women, not as many, but then that's a strong risk factor. So you know that you're immediately behind the eight ball. So you need to maximize from a dietary perspective your calcium intake, and you needed to do it when you were young. So, think before age 30, where bone mass peaks. You need to maximize your vitamin D intake, so sunlight exposure or taking vitamin D. And you need to maximize your capacity to build bone, which is really built up through impactful exercises, resistance exercise included, but even jumping, and people sort of call that high load exercise. Well, it could be your body weight, but it's definitely high impact. And bone appears to like these sort of high impact forces. And, even some of the best trials out there show that you can get that with as little as, two or three exposures a week to sort of impactful exercise. And then people say, what about running? And I'm like, well, running contains, it does have impact, but too much running is probably bad. Bone's not like muscle, and that muscle, if you keep exposing it, it tends to sort of get bigger and better to a certain point. But bone is actually, it likes this minimal low intensity, or sort of low, no, I should say low intensity. It likes a minimal amount in terms of time intensity stimulus to turn on all of the bone formation mechanisms and suppress the bone resorption mechanisms. And you can get that within about 15 to 20 minutes of work 3 times a week. So it could be heavy weights. It could be sort of moderate weights done for a little bit longer, but it's a short window. And after that, bone kind of switches off that anabolic stimulus, but you've still got to get one and two in place. So you've got to get the calcium, the vitamin D, and you've got to get the exercise and don't smoke, don't drink too much alcohol. If your family history is, so there's a lot of things that you have to do to maximize that, exercise being one part of it. But again, exercise is great for some people. Some people respond really well to it from a bone perspective, and some people don't. And you'd have to accept that as sort of just a caveat with just about anything from a health perspective. Some people respond really well to certain drugs, some people don't. It's the same with exercise. So make sure you understand your risk factors first. Make sure you're maximizing your dietary intake of the two nutrients I mentioned, and then make sure you're getting those stimuli in there. It could be as little as like sort of, I read one Finnish intervention that reduced fracture risk, and it was basically community-based, like sort of dancing and stomping on the floor. There was no weights involved at all, and it was pretty effective. Improved balance and a whole kind, all so the stimulus can be lots of different things, but it doesn't have to be you know heavy weights.
Yeah. What is the mechanism, if you can explain it, on the bone, like when you're doing resistance training, so you're lifting
Sure.
weights, can you just explain how that can help prevent that loss of bone mineral density?
Yeah, so put it in simple terms, there's two different types of cells within bone. There's this type of cell that responds and makes bone, and there's another type of cell that what we call resorbs bone, and it essentially sort of, breaks it down and it actually releases calcium into circulation. The cells that make bone are sensitive to mechanical stimulation. So even vibration has been used, stamping, jumping, resistance training. And those cells effectively get turned on and they just tip the balance towards bone formation as opposed to what we call bone resorption or loss of bone. So, with the onset of menopause, the big hormonal stimulus that keeps these bone stimulating cells going, which is estrogen, is lost. And so now the balance tips, net in favor of resorption or loss of bone. And so now we have to maximize the lifestyle factors. But hopefully, what you did before you were 30 was you spent some time in the sun, you probably drank some dairy, or, you got a good source of calcium, you didn't have a family history, you didn't smoke, you didn't drink, etc. And you've got good peak bone mass, because what we do know is that two women going into menopause, one with high and one with lower bone mass, they'll go downhill at the same rate, but
Mhm.
this woman will hit some sort of threshold at which her fracture risk goes up sharply sooner than this woman will. And, hopefully you hit that as late in life as possible, where falls become a much greater risk and then fracture becomes a much greater risk. But, we all know the data, and it's shocking if you get a hip fracture after age 75, it's bad news. Half of those people are dead after 2 years. So you want to try and avoid that. But it matters what you did early on in life as well. It's
Yeah.
not some sort of immediately correctable phenomenon around menopause. So hence the
Mhm.
message, you know, make an investment in your future self. If you can, think about it in your even in your 20s and 30s. And the same is true for muscle. And I hate to say that. Everybody goes, "Oh, well, you don't lose muscle until you're 50." And I'm like, that's not true. For most people, they're losing it before that time. So,
I had Phil Chillibeck on the
oh
podcast
yeah,
last
yeah,
year.
yeah,
Yeah, your buddy.
yeah, awesome.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so he actually made me feel really good about doing gymnastics in my youth. Like I competed nationally
Yeah,
gymnastics, and he's
yeah,
like, that is like
yeah,
the best exercise because of all of the ways you're moving your body, strength
yeah,
training, like it's just such a great sport. But yeah,
yeah.
so if you're listening right now, you're like, maybe it's too late for me. I mean, it's never too late, right? But
No,
also, if you have grandkids, get them moving daily as much as you can. So
I think
important.
there's a big physical literacy part that goes with gymnastics too, and maybe like phys ed has changed since I was a kid or whatever. We must have done like 1,001 forward rolls, right, or backwards rolls and cartwheels and handstands. And I didn't do gymnastics, but I could do a handstand and everything else like that. You ask my kids to do a forward roll, and I'm like, "What the heck was that?" And they go, "We never did this," and I'm like, "That's all we did in
Yeah.
phys ed."
We had
But
that
yeah,
little
no.
like sports training or whatever. Didn't we have like skills? We had to all like
Yeah,
have a
yeah.
skill day. I got asked to be the example all the time, and I was very proud.
Ah, well, of course, of course, of course. Yeah, no,
Was.
gymnastics, lots of high impact stuff, and yeah, no, it's great for bone for sure.
Yeah. And getting the DEXA scan, folks, is very insightful because then you can
Yeah,
sort of see where you're at. They're not free in Canada anyway.
no,
It's about, anywhere between $100 and $300, I guess you can get a scan, but then you can see where your bone
yeah,
density is at and, maybe kick up your game a little bit if
yep,
it's in a trouble spot. Okay, I have to talk to you about protein because that's your thing. And
yeah,
last year we talked and we were talking about protein amounts. And of
yeah,
course, we all have heard all over the internet that no one is eating enough protein.
yeah,
And so some of the amounts have just been this astronomical amount of protein that we need. There's that word again, need
yeah,
versus
yeah,
could, get into your
yeah,
diet. So
yeah.
let's revisit that. Let's talk about what is, needed, I guess, just to ensure muscle protein synthesis is taking place and to ensure satiety and to help optimize all the things that we want to optimize.
Sure. So go back to the bone analogy. So muscle's a little different, but if you're eating protein, you're providing the precursors, amino acids that we need to make muscle proteins, as opposed to breaking down muscle proteins. And so everybody wants to tip the balance in the favor of making as opposed to losing muscle, and for as long as we can. But let's be very honest about the primary driver of tipping that balance in favor, and that's loading exercise. So if you're lifting weights and you're doing it on a regular basis, that is the best thing that you can do to tip the scales in favor of, if not building muscle, definitely retaining muscle. So let's be really clear about that. What protein is it is the layer on top of the cake. So the cake is baked by lifting the weights, to give you an analogy. I don't know how thin or thick the layer of icing is. It might depend how much protein you were starting with. If you weren't eating very much and you could eat a little bit more, that would be great. So what is not very much? I think what is called the recommended dietary allowance, or RDA, which is used in Canada and the United States, which is 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, or about 0.35 grams per pound, is sufficient. But, so that's the sort of basal, I call it the basal need level, although a lot of people will say that it's adequate. I don't think that that's the case. And without getting too deep in the weeds, lots of research to support my viewpoint, but other people differ. So just being honest. Up from there, I think you could probably go as high as double that intake. So 1.6 grams per kilo, or 0.7 grams per pound. Which, if you work it out, is for a lot of people, a lot of women in particular, they would say, wow, that's a lot of protein. So if you're 70 kilos and you multiply it by 0.7, then you're eating a lot of protein. And that could intimidate some people, but I think what it really means is focusing on protein at just about every meal. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner, as opposed to a relatively speaking, lower protein breakfast, a moderate lunch, and then more at dinner. So trying to sort of include Greek style yogurt, dairy, eggs, that sort of thing at breakfast, as opposed to cereals and grains. Not that that's bad, but just it re-emphasizes and tips the protein balance. So it's somewhere in that range. And I think, that's a very broad range. So 0.35 to 0.7 grams per pound, or 0.8 to 1.6 grams per kilo. We could bat that back and forth about, how much that really matters. I think higher than 0.35 is better, but beyond 0.7, I think it really becomes a series of diminishing returns. In other words, the satiety control that people talk about, there's actually no evidence that supports that. And I'll just say it simply. Every time there's been a claim in front of any food regulatory agency around protein creating satiety, and so in other words, when you eat it, you feel full, and that would somehow control and regulate your appetite, that you wouldn't eat other things, it's been denied. And so again, there's a lot of people who have looked into these claims, and they just aren't allowed to be made because the evidence is so weak. There's definitely a protein-mediated satiation effect, and I think, in my heart of hearts, I think that that's the case, but I think it ends much sooner than people who are talking about 2.2 grams per kilo or 1 gram per pound say, oh, it's a satiety effect. And I'm like, I just, there's actually no data to support that. There's a lot of anecdotal data, stories. But the truth is that on a mass scale, I don't see it. So I'm going to stop at about 0.7 grams per pound and say that I think that's the upper optimal limit. But there are plenty of papers out there which talk about much higher intakes than that. And I think when you dig inside the paper and you look at the evidence, I think it's relatively thin. So if you want to eat more, I don't have any issue with that. I think that there's probably a limit. If you want to eat more than definitely 1 gram per pound, I think you're well overcooking it. And a lot of people say, oh, well, what's the problem with eating too much protein? And my main issue is not to do with kidney health, because that's not an issue. It's not to do with bone health, because that's not an issue, as long as you're getting adequate calcium and vitamin D. But it's probably that it's displacing something else from your diet and
Mm.
something else that you probably need that has a nutrient profile that would be good as if you ate that food as well. And when you get into those high intakes, people begin to rely a lot on supplements. And I'm not bashing supplements per se, but just realizes that bars and supplements and everything else are ultimately they're processed foods. And I think that that's the food category that we need to squeeze down a little bit and just rely on real food and
Mhm.
and enjoy the process of eating real food as well, which is I think that's something that's forgotten, right? Like people making a meal and sitting down and eating a meal, particularly with friends and family. I think that's the cornerstone of like good nutrition and a lot of other social interactions that are good for you anyway.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I agree with that. You're trying to get that adequate protein amount, and you're definitely just thinking, what's my next meal? I need this. I can't go without it. I've just finished my workout. I got to get it in.
Yeah.
Like there's that sort of pressure. I know that you use the garage door. Uh, um,
That's not mine. That's not
oh, it's
mine.
not
There's a
yours? Okay.
guy. No, 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 no. But I'll get to just I got to
Yeah,
give full
tell us
credit.
about it.
There's a
Yeah.
guy named Sean Arendt who's down at the University of South Carolina, and he wrote a paper called it's the garage door of opportunity after you exercise. And so, in other words, it's not just, the window that gets opened and then closes. So we used to think, you did exercise, the window opened, get your nutrients, and then it closed, and it was 3 or 4 hours and, it was really short. And now our expanded understanding is that that window is actually a big, wide garage door, and it's probably open for about 24 hours is for most people the case. So, and I hear from a lot of coaches, well, I like my athletes to fuel and start the recovery process right away. And I'm like, yeah, like if you're a serious athlete and performance matters, I think that that's pragmatic and good information. If you're a mere mortal, I think that the anxiety around,
Yeah.
um, carrying your protein shaker to the gym is a little overblown, to be
Yeah.
frank.
I just see this is exactly what we need more of is just this common sense brought back to us so that it's true though, right? Like I feel like we're just all so like scurrying as fast as we can to try and do all of the things. And there
Yeah,
doesn't need to be the scurrying because you're not a top tier athlete, folks. You're just you looking to do your best. And what Dr. Phillips is saying here is that, it's don't panic. You just get in what you can get in, and here are some good guidelines for you.
yeah,
Let's just talk about the anabolic resistance because as
yeah,
we're aging, it becomes more true.
yeah,
In menopause, we've lost our estrogen, we've lost our hormones. So can you just talk to us about exactly what anabolic resistance is and
yeah,
if our needs for resistance training and protein need to shift, what do they need to shift from and to?
yeah. I'll come back to the point that you just made, and I think it's been very educational for me to spend time on social media and to hear from women. And hand on my heart, my wife's an academic here at the university. She does research in cardiovascular physiology, and really about 5 or 6 years ago, she started saying to me, she goes, like, I've really done this wrong. Like we've included way too many men in the studies we've done. We need to start including women. And I said, oh, well, hormonal status, like oral contraceptives, it's kind of a minefield. And, the irony is that dial it back to, my first author paper, 1993. I know real science was done back then. It was a comparison between men and women, and we saw these really small differences in protein turnover, and probably should have remembered that, but long forgotten. And I said, you know what, you're probably right. We need to make a switch. My wife did it way earlier than I did, but we've got some studies going on now, lots of work in women. We've got some more. I've got a big study firing up in perimenopausal women as well, and so we're looking for answers. And
Mhm.
I think that the easiest thing to say is that the change that happens in perimenopause is, for lots of women, it's a tremendous upheaval. It's not just physiological, it's psychological, and I have no no lived experience, so I can only talk about it based on what I read, based on what I see, because my wife's going through it, as are a lot of her friends. Um, and it's tough. I'll say that. All I can talk about is data and physiology. So I'll tell you what the data says. So anabolic resistance is when your muscle receives amino acids and it responds and it tips that protein synthesis process greater than protein breakdown. So we're net making. At some point, there's something that happens, and it happens in men too, that your muscle becomes resistant to the protein. So people's solution to that has been, well, we'll just eat more protein because, and we've done some work in this area as well. More protein contains an amino acid that triggers the response, and that amino acid, if people are interested, is leucine, but glazing over that. And so that's been the solution. They're like, we need more protein because of anabolic resistance, and menopause causes anabolic resistance. Well, it's not menopause per se, but age results in anabolic resistance. The phenomenon happens in men. We can make it happen in young people by putting them in bed, by making them
Okay.
inactive, or
Yeah.
telling them not to do anything. So inactivity is baked into part of the answer as to what anabolic resistance is. So once again, if you're physically active, and particularly if you're lifting weights, then the chances are is that actually you're probably not much more anabolically resistant than you were when you were younger. And then the next narrative that I hear a lot about is, well, during perimenopause, the loss of estrogen causes anabolic resistance, and we lose muscle because of the loss of estrogen. And like, I can't really say it enough times, but the data shows that that's not true. Is that the loss of muscle that women experience between age 45 and 55, which is the decade in which 95% of women will lose their menstrual cycle, is age-related loss. It proceeds linearly, and it doesn't sort of have this inflection point, which is what you would expect to see in women if estrogen were the stimulus for hanging on to muscle. Now, there is a female researcher named Severine Lamont, and she's got a lab down in Australia, and she shows that women get weaker in that transition period. And that's been taken as evidence to say, oh, look what estrogen does. But she thinks it's actually a neuromuscular thing. So something between the brain talking to the muscle. And she has an interesting paper on that. So, read her work. It's fantastic work. And there is a little bit of data to show that women do lose a little bit of extra muscle. When you replace hormones, so we used to call it HRT, now it's MHT, menopause hormone therapy, I think much better label. Women don't gain muscle back or better. But it alleviates symptoms. And I think, a lot of women have said to me, but it made my sleep better. It did this. I didn't have as many hot flashes and everything. And I get that. Like, if you can straighten out these symptoms that are just, turning your life upside down, then I could see that that would be the gateway to then being able to do some of the behaviors that we're talking about. So you felt like going to the gym, you felt like working out,
Yes.
you felt like yourself, right? As opposed to, I think if you took a group of 30-year-old women who aren't going through menopause and you just basically, turned a hot fan on them every 40 minutes during their sleep and you disrupted their sleep, you get a lot of
The
similar
same.
symptomology
Sure.
for them going like, what the hell is going on, right? And I've said this a tons of times, and I'll say it again. And I truly believe that. I gain no lived experience, but watching it happen, if men experience this, we would have had a global commission to solve this shit like decades ago. Like, guys, there's no way guys could put up with this. It would drive
No,
them.
no.
But for too long, women, it's just like, oh, that's just the change. You just
Yeah.
suck it up. And
Yeah.
those days are over, and that's good.
Yeah.
Um, but the truth is that all of the maladaptation that's supposed to, like, your body becomes completely metabolically inflexible, you gain weight that is apparently, impossibly resistant to lose and everything, it becomes much more difficult. I won't deny that. But the physiology says is that the change is important, and there are systems cardiovascular wise that respond very, very differently. But muscle wise, the differences aren't big.
Mhm.
And that upsets people, women in particular, when I say that. But I'm like, that's just data. It's not my opinion.
It's
That's
not
data.
personal. Yeah.
Yeah, I try not to make it that.
Yeah. I grew up very active, so like sports when I was younger, and then
Yeah.
I started lifting weights when I was 27. So all of these
Yeah.
years, I'm 55 now.
Yeah.
So, and my bone density is good, muscle mass, and honestly, yeah, I'm not on menopause hormone therapy just because I don't have any symptoms. I'm feeling good. I don't
Yeah.
feel
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
need it, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like that my past has really helped paint a good picture. Like I don't feel like I'm losing muscle. I feel like I'm stronger than ever.
No.
I think so there are these cases where when we have made the deposits into our health and wellness early, like it is carrying us through in a
Yeah.
really amazing way. I
Yeah.
feel happy about that. So
Yeah.
blessed.
And you may not have even realized it when you were younger. It's just what you did, right? But
Yeah.
I think, at your age, my age, I'm older. But looking back, you go, I did something good for myself back then. And the only way I can describe it to people is it's like compound interest, right? So you put the effort in, and probably when I was 30, there's no way I had any notional, idea about longevity and health span. But now those folks they know those words and they've got it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to live till here. And I'm like, it's amazing that you have a vision of your future you, right? And you know what that's going to be, because I do think that then you're going to enter older age in much better shape than people who, just either through life circumstances or, it was never part of their routine, don't do very much. So I agree. I don't think the exercise is the solve for everything. And as you say, without the symptoms, but I have spoken to, through social media and otherwise, women who, menopause hormone therapy or testosterone was a overused word maybe, but game changer for them. And
Sure.
like, I respect that. I can't
Mhm.
argue against that. So, let's just say for a lot of women, it's great, and very welcome relief. And I'm glad, you get relief. Just realize it's relief of the symptoms, but all of the muscle physiology and the weight gain and everything else like that, it's really, it's not a solve for them. And there's no data that shows that it is.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that at the end there because, yeah, we still have to do all of the hard things of moving daily, of making wise choices in our nutrition, of honoring
Yeah.
our bodies, right? That is
Yep.
still the hard work that all of us need to do. So good.
Amen. Yeah.
Sir, thank you so much for your
My
wisdom and your
pleasure.
insight
My
and your
pleasure.
knowledge. You guys have to follow him because he's so smart. And I'm just gonna
Thank
pump
you.
your girl here, but yeah,
I
but you
I
just bring it,
appreciate your
you bring
comments. Yeah.
yeah, and you bring it back to just the basics, which I think we all need. And don't get hung up on all of the noise, folks. Just bring it back to the basics. Follow Dr. Stuart Phillips. And where can people follow you
Appreciate it.
over on Instagram?
I'm on Instagram as MacKinProf, MacKinProf. That's McMaster Kinesiology Professor. I'm the same on TikTok, although I'm on that platform mainly to irritate my youngest son, who says old people shouldn't be on TikTok.
How rude.
I know. Yeah, so that's why I got on there. And I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook. Yeah, I'm on X
Yeah,
as well. So you can find me on just about every platform with that handle, or a quick internet search. I'm easy to find.
absolutely. And he's even in Chat GPT.
Yes.
You can just say, what would Stuart Phillips say? And then they will tell you.
Is that right? You
It,
can ask it that, huh?
Totally.
Okay, yeah. I
I
got to check
like for
that
my
out.
coach, for my coaching calls, I say, bring up all, I said, give me all of the information and say it in the voice of Dr. Stuart Phillips. How would he teach this and coach us? And then it just brings up your
Yeah.
papers, and then it brings up all your social media stuff, and it just combines it into wonderful information. So
I keep being told that it's going to take our jobs one day.
I
So
know,
yeah, yeah.
yikes. I'm a bit nervous about that. Like, well, this is our
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
community. We got to really double
Yeah,
down on
no,
community.
that AI is never going to stand there and lift weights. So come on, folks, you got to get out there and do
That's
it.
right.
Yeah,
That's right.
absolutely. Yeah,
Well, thank you again for being my guest. And to all
my
of you,
pleasure.
now go move daily in your fitness, your wellness, your nutrition, and we'll see you all in the next Move Daily Talks.